Welcome to another episode of Sideline Sanity with me, Michele Tafoya. Big changes coming in a matter of days. We hope you'll stick around and subscribe, and you'll be part of that change. Someone who's trying to be a part of change is a woman named Mary Harrington. She's from the UK. She's got a book out called Feminism Against Progress. She is fascinating. She is smart. She calls herself a nerd. I call her incredibly well-spoken and very, very thoughtful. Well, she tweeted out something about gender reassignment surgery. And that tweet got her canceled from a book launch party, her own book, at a venue in New York City. She's going to tell us that story and how she stood up to it. Because guess what? She's still coming to New York City, and she's still having a book launch in spite of people trying to cancel her over a tweet. If I seem a little ticked off, it's because I'm sick of people trying to cancel people over tweets. But I am heartened by the conversation you're about to hear between me and Mary Harrington.
For nearly 3 decades, she's reported the action from the sidelines. She started very young. She's covered the NBA, NFL, Olympics, and the college football and basketball national championships. And now, during these insane times in our world, Michele Tafoya thinks we need a serious dose of sanity. This is Sideline Sanity with your host, one of the sanest people on planet Earth, Michele Tafoya.
Mary Harrington, welcome. I'm so glad to have you. And you are just so interesting in so many ways. But one of the things I admire about people is when they refuse to be canceled. They refuse to apologize or say, okay, we don't need to go there. They just stand on their own 2 feet next to their values, which is what you've done recently. You were to have a book opening in New York. Why don't you take us through what happened there?
Well, it was Compact and First Things magazine very generously offered to arrange to host a book launch party for me in New York City. As far as we knew, everything was arranged, everything was booked, and we were ready to go. The invitations had gone out, the venue had been publicized. And then I received a very alarming message from the guys at Compact saying, can we speak urgently? There's something has happened. And they told us that the venue had been pressured to withdraw the booking because of, I think the precipitating offense was a tweet that I made. And I'm normally fairly moderate in my language on Twitter. I don't believe in ad hominem. I try not to get into stupid arguments with people. I mean, nobody's got time for that, right?
Right.
So I don't normally use fiery language unless I feel very strongly about something. But pediatric gender transition is something I feel very strongly about. I think it's vivisection performed without control on children. I think it's profoundly morally wrong, and the people who do it ought to be ashamed of themselves, and they ought to be condemned in the strongest possible language. So I used a tweet. It referred to some doctors at a children's hospital in the United States, and I called them butchers. Because in my view, what they're doing to young women, they're performing mastectomies on otherwise healthy teenage girls under the age of 18, at an age where you really are not able to consent to those kinds of far-reaching things. And I mean, we have a number of detransitioners on the record now speaking with anger and grief about what's been done to them and what they were rushed into. And I think it's profoundly wrong, and I think it's a kind of butchery to cut healthy body parts off young women who are essentially suffering from a mental illness. Treating mental illness in young women with surgery has a long and infamous history. In the 19th century, there were quack doctors who performed hysterectomies on young women as a treatment for quote unquote hysteria. This is well known, and it's been extensively commented on in feminist history. And what I find extraordinary is that a great many of the feminists who condemn this barbarous practice of performing hysterectomies on adolescent women in the 19th century will then turn round and pretty much in the same breath say that we must protect trans kids by allowing 15-year-old girls to get their breasts chopped off for what is essentially the same kind of psychiatric distress. And so I spoke out very in clear, what I think of as clear and angry language about something which I think is deeply wrong, only to find that that social media pressure had been applied to the venue to withdraw the booking. So apparently in New York City, you may not say that cutting body parts off children is wrong because of an identity issue, and we were then compelled to go and find another venue. I was surprised. Well, I was dismayed, I suppose you could say, but not entirely surprised.
Yeah.
My views on gender ideology are in the public domain, and I'm not ashamed of them.
Yeah,
but nor was I going to say, and I'm not going to apologize for saying what's true. Humans still can't change sex, and I'm still coming to New York City.
Amen to that. Yes, your quote reads as follows, your tweet: "Every single one of these butchers is female. Never forget that this isn't just about patriarchy. It's also a war within feminism." And you were retweeting a photo of these women who were helping with quote unquote gender affirming surgeries. It is amazing. And it does seem, Mary, to me that this is almost a fad here that we're seeing of this transitioning at a very young age. And I try to picture myself, and I have a daughter who's 14, so it doesn't take much for me to picture the fact that your brain isn't fully formed. You're not a good decision maker, which is why you're not allowed to do so many things before the age of 18 or 21 or drive before you're 16, because you're not there. You're not developed. You're still a puppy, as it were, running around and chasing your tail. And so to have this moment of, I really think I'm a male. Let's go see a doctor. And then have all this attention poured onto you by the medical community, by your parents, by your surrounding, your family, your friends, whomever. Or maybe you didn't have friends. And this is somehow this new sense of attention. Yeah, let's go do the surgery. And it becomes almost, you used the word hysteria before. It almost does become this hysterical reaction and very quickly turns into surgery. I don't understand why this is becoming normalized. What do you think is behind this recent surge in these surgeries?
Well, I think there are a lot of different factors we can look at, but let's take a few in no particular order. For one, we can follow the money. There are a great many entrepreneurial biotechnology and there's a lot of people making a lot of money out of it. If you can persuade some young individual that they will only be fully self-actualized as a sterile simulacrum of the opposite sex, then they will then be in hock to you for their synthetic hormones for the rest of their natural lives. And just, never mind the side effects, never mind the fact that they may develop osteoporosis, they may develop brain, they may be cognitively inhibited, they will almost certainly be permanently sterilized. Never mind any of that. What you do have is a permanent, lifelong patient. Customer, really.
Yeah.
There are the number of gender clinics that have sprung up across the United States in just the last 20 years is stunning. And it's difficult not to see that there are a great many people who are just seeing a new business opportunity. I mean, the growth year on year in how much this industry is worth is extraordinary. Yep. So thing number one, follow the money. Mm-hmm. Thing number two, I think we need to point our fingers a little bit somewhat at the internet if we're going to look at what's driving demand. Now, adolescent mental distress is not new, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there are teenagers in the Middle Ages who are starving themselves and just telling a different story about what was going on.
Right.
I was not a happy teenager.
I was not either, Mary. I was not either.
Right. Many such cases, there are lots of us have been there, going from being a child to being a woman is not easy, especially in a world where there are very few guardrails or guidelines, and there's very little protection for you against a great many predatory or negative influences that can be out there and that can harm you before you really know that there is such a thing as the kind of harm that you've now irreversibly suffered. I mean, there are lots of things about going from a child to being a woman which have always been difficult, and I think some have become more difficult because for one thing, the absolutely saturated, the porn saturated condition of the modern world, thanks to the internet. I mean, I believe it's now somewhere between 9 and 11 is children's first exposure to pornography. Yeah. And if all your male peers have been marinated in really sometimes incredibly extreme and degrading pornography, I mean, this is, I used to find the lingerie magazines in the hedge when I was a teenager in the 1990s, and that's not what it's like anymore. It really isn't. Where we really aren't in Kansas anymore. No. And children are literally children are being exposed to staggeringly depraved visual materials, and I mean that's going to mess with you, right? Yeah. And if you're a young woman and you internalize the idea that to be a woman is to be objectified and abused and degraded and sometimes literally tortured in this way, I don't really blame some of them for wanting to opt out. I mean, if I were 15 now, I'd probably want to opt out. It seems like a completely rational response to a pretty intolerable situation. So there's that, but so there are some particular pressures, I think, on young women. But worse still is the experience of sociality which comes with the internet itself in general. Even if you're not marinating in porn, because I dare say there are kids who manage somehow to escape that particular minefield. But even so, if you've grown used to the idea that you can socialize in a way which is completely separate from your body. Say you're interacting with your friends remotely while you're all playing computer games together, or you're socializing in Minecraft, or you're texting each other after school, and a huge amount of your social life happens not in the physical world. You're just going to get used to the idea that your body and yourself are two separate things. Mm-hmm. And you're also going to get used to the idea that you can reskin your avatar whenever you want to, and that in a sense you're in control of your. And so why would you not then apply that to your meat avatar? And I think there's a lot of these kids just straightforwardly see this as a matter of justice because that's just how they experience what it is to be a person, because that's what's been normalized for them through growing up online. So that's thing number two. Thing number one, follow the money. Thing number two, look at the internet, look at what the internet does. And thing number three, I think the reason this is being rolled out institutionally is because it's in the interests of professional women. And this is a very difficult subject to get into. But
okay, if you hold on one second, Mary. Let me stop you right there. This is a difficult subject to get into, and it's a great tease.
It very much is.
Quick break, and Mary will explain right after this. Hey, if you are looking for the best way to celebrate your favorite mom this Mother's Day, and kids, if you're listening, this is something I would like too. Genucel Skincare has you covered. It's formulated with skin-nourishing antioxidants, powerful peptides in a proprietary base that's manufactured right here in the United States. And trust me, every mom, yours truly included, loves a few moments of relaxation and to take the time to care for herself. And that's where Genucel Skincare comes in. Now you can look good and feel good. All right, this is Genucel, Genucel. It's formulated by a pharmacist with quality ingredients. Their products are sure to noticeably smooth fine lines and wrinkles and then prevent new ones from coming. One of my favorites is the deep firming serum with stem cell technology. I apply it after I've cleansed my skin and immediately I feel like my skin is just fresher. It woke up. It's dare I say, more youthful. And right now you can save over 70% off Genucel's most popular package featuring Genucel's Ultra Retinol that contains a powerful retinol alternative, safe on pregnancies and safe for breastfeeding, by the way. You'll also receive Genucel's Dark Spot Corrector to reduce the appearance of dark marks and sunspots from long summer days outdoors. Plus, you still get Genucel's classic under eye bags therapy for those annoying under eye bags and puffiness. And with its immediate effects, see results in as little as 12 hours guaranteed or your money back. What do you have to lose? So don't wait. Celebrate your favorite mom, or as our guest says, your favorite mum, by going to Genucel.com/Michele, Michele, to save over 70% off their most popular package. Plus, every package includes a luxury gift box with 3 free springtime essentials. That's 3 free gifts plus free concierge shipping for a limited time. Go to Genucel.com, Genucel.com/Michele. That's Genucel.com/Michele with 1 L. And happy Mother's Day or happy Mom's Day. All right, Mary. First of all, I want to say how lovely it is to hear someone with your accent say we're not in Kansas anymore. That was great. That was a great moment. All right. So we're on to thing number 3 behind this.
Thing number 3.
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So the first two things I listed when we were reflecting on what could be driving the epidemic of gender ideology. Thing number 1, follow the money. Thing number 2, look at the internet. Thing number 3, professional women. I should, to be clear, I count myself as a laptop class woman. I mean, here I am talking to you on my laptop. I write for a living. I could theoretically do my job from anywhere. I'm university educated. I'm very much a member of the knowledge class. So, and all the things all the advances in equality, in the sense of your sex just really not mattering at all, are very much things that I've benefited from. But, and there's a big but, liberal feminism of the kind that I'm describing, liberal feminism of the kind which is generally adopted by professional women, believes, and this is really what I believed until I became a mother, that the way forward for all of us, and the good in particular for women, can be attained if we can only get rid of all the ways that our sex makes us different. If only we can escape all of the limitations that our bodies put on us. And this is just there as a very basic assumption. I saw actually a perfect example of this from a perfect avatar of this on Twitter today. This is a British liberal feminist campaigner called Charlotte Proudman, who first became famous for publicly slapping down a male lawyer who commented on her appearance on LinkedIn. That was her first encounter with fame about 10 years ago. Since then, she's a high profile advocate for feminist causes. She's a vocal liberal feminist, and she tweeted today a photograph of the British baby goods store Mothercare. It's a chain store that sells little booties and buggies and the sort of stuff, like stuff for little babies. It's called Mothercare, and she tweeted a picture of the storefront and with the caption, "Why shouldn't we should rename it Parent Care?" And I'm like, okay, so this is a perfect example of where actually the push to erase women is coming from, because women such as Proudman, who are lawyers, who are professionals, genuinely believe that that women of their kind will only be able to flourish when there are no distinctions whatsoever between the sexes. God. When there are when there's no legal or social recognition of sex difference whatsoever. And from the point of view of somebody who's a lawyer, that's probably kind of true, because if you live in that sort of elite world, you probably don't often encounter situations where where the physical differences between you and a man really do make a difference. I mean, there's no reason why a woman shouldn't be as good a lawyer as a man, right? You can be. We're all just as smart. But she's probably not thinking about those areas of life and work where actually our bodies really do matter, because that's just not the world that she lives in. So she's not thinking about the people who collect the trash, or she's not thinking about the people who do arduous physical work for a living. Mm-hmm. She's not thinking about the guys who come around with the bins. Nobody's campaigning for women to be better represented in waste collection, and everybody knows why. Because it's low status and it's hard work,
right?
So, and yet it's women like Charlotte Proudman who have the mic, and it's women like Charlotte Proudman who are supporting the belief that everybody can identify into whatever gender they want, because they believe what gender you are shouldn't have what sex you are shouldn't have any bearing on how you present or how anybody meets you or how anybody responds to you, because fundamentally it's in her class interests as a professional woman to abolish sex and to abolish the legal and economic and political standing of sex, because at the end of the day it suits her interests as a high-flying professional to do so. And if you look at throughout the sectors of society where gender ideology is being rolled out and which are being used to enforce gender ideology, whether it's academia, whether it's teaching, whether it's NGOs, or whether it's the law, or whether it's pretty much every single one of these professions is dominated by women. And these are knowledge class women, who are they're the Charlotte Proudmans of this world, and they're rolling out an ideology which suits them, and they don't care about the great many people for whom it's a net negative. which is essentially every man and woman who still has to live in the material world.
In the real world, yeah,
So this is an elite capture
yeah.
This is an elite capture of the word feminism in the name of a policy which is directly counter to the interests of most women and frankly most people of both sexes.
I would say, yeah, most people. Mary Harrington, our guest. When we come back, I want to talk about when you became a mother, because that seemed to really change a lot of your views on things, or maybe it was just getting pregnant. But we'll talk about this and about this taking away the differences between men and women in an extreme sense of how some young women today would prefer to give birth. That's right after this. From Affirm Films comes Big George Foreman, the miraculous story of the once and future heavyweight champion of the world. Based on a true story of one of the greatest comebacks of all time and the transformational power of second chances. Big George Foreman, starring Chris Davis and Academy Award winner Forrest Whitaker. Rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for children under 13. Only in theaters beginning April 28th. For tickets and showtimes, go to biggeorgeforeman.movie. So, Mary, I heard about this technology, this medical advancement, quote unquote, where we can grow an embryo in a sac outside of a woman's body. Like they're doing it with sheep or something, or, and so to see that, can we grow an embryo into a living being outside of the mammal that usually carries it? And some young women were asked about what they thought about this, and they thought, well, that'd be great, because then finally men and women would be equal, that because I wouldn't have to carry the child. The man doesn't have to carry the child. So this would be great. This would really even the playing field. And I'm a woman who had a really hard time getting and staying pregnant, lost many children, and finally, thank God, was able to have my son and then adopted our daughter. You talk about your pregnancy as being monumental in your life. And to me, this notion that someone would rather have the baby grow, in a lab somewhere to fruition and then be birthed out of a plastic bag is a good idea and would level the playing field and make life easier and better for women. And I'll tell you what, I wish I could get pregnant again to go through what an amazing experience that was. When you got pregnant and you had your child, how did all of that sort of affect your worldview, if you will, on feminism?
As I mentioned earlier in our conversation, I very much believed at one point in my life that to pursue the good as a woman meant to be in no way constrained by my physical being, including my femaleness, and that was what I believed that feminism was the political push for a world where our sex just didn't matter, and that we could use technology or culture or politics or campaigning to get rid of it, and that being free in that way from any constraints was a good thing by definition. When I got pregnant, I realized it wasn't actually that simple, and that, well, for one thing, I really wanted the baby, and because I wanted her and I loved her from the moment I knew she was coming. The experience, I mean, you know what it's like to be pregnant. You're not one person anymore. Mm-hmm. You're no longer just thinking about yourself. You're no longer free. Right. But it's not bad. And I think this is what's just impossible to explain. It's like going through you go through the looking glass. Even if you drunk the Kool-Aid and you completely believed beforehand that the only that to be encumbered and to be limited and to be constrained in that way was bad and could only possibly be oppressive. I realized that it wasn't. All of a sudden I'm making choices about what I eat, not just based on my interests, but on both of our interests. And it's affected how easily I can move around. It affects so much. Yeah. But you want it. It's welcome. And the worst thing in the world you could imagine would be to have that sense of being occupied taken away before it's ready. And I think this is just incredibly difficult to explain to somebody who hasn't experienced it. And it's incredibly difficult to explain to a woman who's been convinced that there's something invasive and horrifying and destructive to their independence about it, that there could be anything desirable in that state. So in a sense, I'm not surprised to hear that coming from young women, because there's probably a time in my life there's probably a time when I would have echoed that sentiment and said, yeah, that seems like a great idea. That means that we could just, I don't know, press a button and a baby comes out of the chute and job done, everything, and it's fair. But I mean, when I was researching the book, I read a wonderful book which I recommend to everybody. It's called Mum Genes, Genes, by Abigail Tucker, and she writes this wonderful book about the science of mums. She's a science writer, and she just goes into everything that we know about mums. And one thing that she writes very beautifully about is the way being pregnant doesn't just create a baby; it also creates a mum. And this is really what the growing a baby in a bag people don't understand. It's also what the surrogacy people don't understand. That in an emotional way, the journey that you go on with the baby that you're carrying is part of it. You already have an intimate relationship with this little person long before they're born. Even if that mostly just consists of them giving you heartburn and keeping you awake by doing somersaults when you're trying to go to sleep, but it's there. I mean, you kind, in a weird way, you kind of know who they are already, and then they come out and you're like, oh, there you are, yeah, I know you. And it's and that too is difficult, but at a biological level as well. To be pregnant creates a mum. It rewires your brain. It transforms your entire endocrine hormone system. You grow a whole other internal organ, which isn't just composed of your cells, but also your partner's. I mean, what goes on there is incredible. And you come out the other side of after your first child, and in my case, my only child, you're never the same again. They've studied this extensively. Women who have had babies are just, their brains are wired differently. You know, you respond differently to babies from there on in. There's a whole host of things that you just don't see the same way at all anymore. I mean, there are certain kinds of movies that I can't watch anymore since I became a mum, and I have no idea why, but it's just a thing. And this sort of thing happens a lot. And when we talk about, when people fantasize, and I do think it's a fantasy that anybody's ever actually going to grow human babies in exo wombs. I don't think that's going to happen. You know, people have experimented a bit with, I think, a partially developed fetus, a sheep fetus, was gestated to term in a bag. I mean, it's the ethics of actually being able to experiment on that with human fetuses are so monstrous that I struggle to imagine that happening in the West as things stand. Well, I mean, let's hope it never happens in the future either. But I think there will be an outcry if people set about trying. But where I think we need to push back hard against this is because, in effect, exo wombs already exist. It's just that they're not machines. They're other women's rented uteruses. And where we need to challenge the idea of just doing your gestating somewhere else so that you can be equal with your partner is in commercial surrogacy, or really in any surrogacy at all, because the same thing happens there. You know, the journey of pregnancy doesn't just create a baby; it creates a mother. And if you're essentially commissioning a baby like a designer handbag, then that biological process is absent. And sure, I mean, I have a huge admiration for people who adopt, because there are a great many children who are in need of love and care, and who are in need of homes and the devoted care of a parent, because for whatever reason their circumstances have not made it possible for them to be raised by their own mother or father. But this is not something we should set out intentionally to do, to sever a child from the bond that would normally already be in existence, having developed through the process of pregnancy. I think intentionally gestating a child with the aim of severing that bond is profoundly wicked.
You've made my day with that quote, which I had never heard before. You're not just creating a baby, you're creating a mom. It's I never really have heard it put that way before, and it's just hits the nail right on the head. It's amazing. I got goosebumps when you said it. We're in strange times, and ethics seem to be waning in many corners of the world. And the fact that we can say follow the money when it comes to gender transitioning is, nothing should shock me anymore. But it leaves me speechless that we could be talking about this as an industry and having customers who rely on doctors to make them to try to fix mental health issues with drugs and surgery like this. It's I have a feeling we're going to look back on 2020 and up to maybe 2030 as a really awful time in the world, that we made so many mistakes that we were told were based on science that really aren't. And ignoring other facts of biology, facts of life that we should be paying very close attention to. And I wonder, before I let you go, Mary, are you and I on the side of most people? Are we looking at this as the majority looking at this minority movement in the world? Or are we in the minority, Mary? Are we the ones that are considered the radicals for thinking that this gender transition surgery before you're 18 is cruel?
I think the majority of people still live in the real material world. I think most people on the planet still know that biology exists. I don't think the majority of people agree that humans can literally change sex. Most people just know that that's obviously nonsense. But who gets to set the policy and who has the mic is a different question from who is most numerous. And you can have a silent majority whose views are just discounted because for whatever reason they lack the voice, they lack the leadership, they lack the institutional presence and power,
or they lack the courage
to make their views known.
And they lack the courage.
And I think there are.
Go ahead.
And the truth is that most people just want to be left alone. Most people want to just get on with normal lives. Most people are not nerds like me who think about history and philosophy and try and get a sense of the bigger picture. Most people would prefer to get on with normal lives. Yeah. And I think if there's and it takes a long time for people to collectively come to decide that something's just deeply wrong. And if there's something missing, it's the institutional middle layer. I mean, I think there's where I have hope. It's in the slow development of institutional campaigns that are pushing back for a more realist understanding of our bodies and of our place in the world. It's perhaps, I mean, the gender critical campaign is for some reason very much more developed in Britain than it is in the United States, but I see it happening in the United States now as well. Institutions are forming which are campaigning that they've joined the right battlefield. Because I mean, you can argue back and forth in the media and nothing ever really changes because the media just likes controversy. And if you're only ever fighting in the media, then nothing's ever going. It's never going to move the needle politically because that's just not where the battle is. But where the battle is in the NGOs. And if there's anything that we need more of, it's people who are articulate, who are pushing for common sense policies on the field of NGO.
Yes.
And I'm starting to see that happening, and I'm encouraged about the fact that this is taking shape now. But I hope that can gather some momentum.
I hope so too. Well, I'm heartened after this conversation. I'm right with you there in the nerd world, and I'm with you in the common sense world. And so it's nice to talk to like-minded voices who I think are sane. And you are one of them, and I hope we can have you back.
Thank you.
And all the best with your book.
Yeah, I guess I should. In the US, I would give a shout out to Mums for Liberty and the School Choice Campaign, who I think are a great example of that kind of campaigning on the field of NGOs, who are taking the fight. They're taking the fight to the boards. They're taking the fight to the regulations, and they're moving the needle institutionally. So a huge shout out to the Mums for Liberty, who figured out where the war needs to be fought. So more of that, please. I think.
Absolutely. I'm sure they're going to love that shout out. It's always good to get a shout out in a beautiful accent. I know you don't hear it, but we all love it. Mary, thank you so much. We are not
Thank
in
you so much.
Kansas anymore, but we are so glad to have Mary Harrington as a guest. I loved that. I
Thank you
absolutely
for having me.
applauded. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for listening. Don't forget, as always, be brave and do good. And thanks for listening to Sideline Sanity.